Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a dimly lit, velvet-draped chamber deep within the walls of the Byzantine palace, where the flickering glow of oil lamps casts long shadows over gleaming gold and richly embroidered silks. You trudge inside, the thick carpet muffling your footsteps, and pause by a large canopied bed. Bright brocade pillows piled so high they look like a small mountain ready to collapse. You think, surely this is where an emperor rests, but why would such elaborate pillow fluffing even matter? Well, buckle up, because you're about to find out that, in the Byzantine Empire, feathered cushions were much more than bedtime decor. They were a secret world of power, intrigue, and yes, official pillow fluffers. Before we dive in, a reality check. You probably won't survive this trip into the intimate and surprisingly cutthroat world of imperial bedding. Seriously, keep your wits about you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you want to chat more about fluffing policies or imperial paranoia, drop your location and local time in the comments. Where in the world are you tuning in from? It's always warming to know how vast our community of nocturnal historians reaches. Now, as you settle into your cozy bed or favourite armchair, and we get ready to dive into tonight's trip into medieval times, I invite you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're tuning in from, and what time of day it is for you. It's always warming to know how vast our community of nocturnal historians reaches. Now, as you settle into your cozy bed or favourite armchair and we get ready to dive into tonight's trip into medieval times, I invite you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're tuning in from and what time of day it is for you. It's always warming to know how vast our community of nocturnal historians reaches. Right, back to the scene. You're standing inside the great palace of Constantinople, the glittering heart of Byzantium, somewhere around the 10th century. Emperor Nikephoros is supposed to be asleep, but the truth is that the imperial bedchamber is one of the most tense places you could imagine. The empire's ruler is not just resting, he is hiding, plotting, and worried that every cushioned corner might conceal a deadly threat. You brush your hand over the silken sheets and pillows, and you guessed it, there's someone whose job is to ensure those pillows aren't just soft, but safe. Historians still argue whether this role, often glossed over in thick tomes, was purely practical or steeped in ritual. But it's clear that the seemingly trivial act of fluffing a pillow was entangled with the empire's survival. You'd think fluffing pillows was something grandma did while gossiping, but in Byzantium it was a matter of life and death. Byzantine emperors surrounded themselves with layers of symbolism and security, and the bedchamber was the last frontier of their vulnerability. Pillows, soft and innocuous, were paradoxically a throne's last defence. Imagine fluffy battlements masking poisoned needles, secret messages sewn into seams, and the various attendants who fluffed away with nervous eyes, knowing that a misplaced feather might be an assassin's ticket. You probably imagine this fluffing staff as gentle servants, mindless of palace drama, but nope. This crew was hand-picked, skilled, and yes, a little terrifying. These were eunuchs, often raised in the palace from childhood, trained not only to maintain comfort, but to guard secrets more tightly than any knight's sword. They moved with practiced grace, fluffing pillows without a wrinkle, and watching the emperor's every breath. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some scholars suggest that pillow fluffing was a kind of coded communication. Different fluffing techniques could signal the presence of threats, readiness for meetings, or unexpected visitors, all conveyed silently because in the capital of Constantinople, words might be traps. Imagine the pillows as silent cries or signals fluttering in the feather-stuffed battleground of power. The presence of eunuchs in the imperial bedchamber sparked endless debates among scholars. Were they merely loyal servants, or did their unique status being castrated and thus deemed trustworthy make them essential players in palace intrigue? Historians still argue whether eunuchs had political power behind the throne or were simply the fluffers of empire. Your gaze falls on a particular fluffer, poised with a silver comb beside a pillow. You realise that this scene is more than about comfort, it's about survival. In Byzantium, unlike anywhere else in medieval Europe, pillow fluffing was a profession, a trusted position, a line of defence against darkness. And with that, you're just beginning to understand why the seemingly mundane act of fluffing was a cornerstone of an empire's greatest secrets. You barely have time to settle back into your chair before the story that pun was unavoidable rolls onwards. So, what exactly turned pillow fluffing into a secret language of power in the Byzantine court? You might imagine fluffing as a purely physical task. Ruffle the feathers nicely, plump the corners, make it soft. But, oh no, in the imperial court, pillow fluffing was loaded with subtle meaning, a carefully crafted form of silent communication threaded through the weave of silk and down. Picture yourself there again, in that dark and hushed bedchamber. The emperor's preferred pillow were large, rectangular bouquet of goose feathers sewn in a rare yellow silk had to be just right. Too plush, and the emperor might feel vulnerable. Too firm, and he'd be uncomfortable, distracted by a stiff neck. But beyond mere comfort, the way the pillow was arranged conveyed unspoken messages. This wasn't just fluff, but coded signals. For instance, a certain tuck on the left corner could indicate that court officials had arrived unannounced. A swift, specific pat on the right side could mean the emperor should prepare for urgent counsel. Even the way feathers were brushed light or firm might reveal the emotional state or readiness of the imperial household. Historians still argue whether all these fluff signals were ever formally structured, or simply tacit understandings passed from fluffer to emperor. Some scholars propose that what seems like ritualistic pillow adjustment was an entire protocol of palace communication carefully designed to avoid leaks and espionage. After all, Byzantine politics were brutal and rife with betrayal. Speaking aloud could spur deadly misunderstandings. And speaking of betrayal, the fluffy secret codes also served as a form of imperial paranoia. Emperors regularly feared that anyone including their closest aides might plot their fall. So, pillow fluffing became a way to monitor loyalty without overt confrontation. The fluffer, skilled and discreet, noticed if a pillow was left carelessly plumped, or if certain feathers were missing, subtle clues that something wasn't right. Here's a quirky tidbit you wouldn't expect. Some Byzantine aristocrats believed that the right pillow fluff habit could influence dream sand, therefore the emperor's decisions. Yep, apparently the fluff pattern might dictate whether an emperor dreamed of victory, betrayal, or peace. This belief blossomed into a minor palace superstition, and some fluffers even trained in oniromancy, dream interpretation, advising how to arrange pillows for a good night's vision. Not exactly your average bedtime routine, right? The threads of pillow fluffing stretched far beyond mere practicality. The fluffers were like quiet diplomats, weaving secret messages in fabric and feather. One can't help but chuckle at the thought that the boundaries between fluffing and espionage blurred so much that you'd need a magnifying glass to separate comfort from conspiracy. At the same time, this delicate dance of fluff and signal also doubled as an emotional outlet in a palace of stone-faced courtiers. The fluffer, understanding the pressures of ruling an empire plagued with wars, revolts, and theological disputes, became a quiet companion and unacknowledged emotional support worker, in a way. Adjusting pillows to soothe the emperor's sleepless nights was both a physical and psychological act, and the silent language they shared might have been the only honest conversation the emperor ever had. Speaking of language, there's still some scholarly debate over how widespread this fluff code really was. Was it the emperor and a select handful of attendants, or did it permeate the higher echelons of Byzantine society? Were provincial governors instructed to mimic the fluff protocol as a form of loyalty or signalling? That's still up for discussion. But one thing's clear. Fluffy symbolism wasn't just fluffing it, was a serious, subtle, and sometimes deadly language of power in Byzantium, where every goose feather counted and every crease in silk was an encrypted whisper. As you follow the delicate choreography of pillow fluffing, it's impossible to ignore the players behind this unusual profession. Eunuchs. Yes, those castrated men who occupied peculiar niches of power and privilege within the Byzantine court, trusted not only with the emperor's linens, but with his deepest secrets. It's a strange image, these men, often diminutive and quiet, standing vigil over goose feathers, but their role was far from trivial. You walk alongside one such eunuch fluffer named Basil, who moves with silent precision, his hands expertly patting and turning the fine pillow stuffing without ever disturbing the embroidery. His story orbits intrigue and survival, for eunuchs in Byzantium were uniquely positioned between servitude and influence. By being physically incapable of fathering heirs, they were deemed safe, incapable of founding rival dynasties. This made them ideal confidants and guardians in palace life. Historians are still debating just how much true power eunuchs wielded. Some suggest they were mere servants, fluffed pillows, and followed orders. Others argue they were shadow players, puppeteering court politics behind concealed curtains. Their proximity to the emperor's private chambers gave them unparalleled access and, occasionally, secret political leverage. You might be surprised to learn that eunuchs didn't just fluff pillows. Many trained in scholarship, diplomacy, and even commanded troops. One fluffer might also double as a spy, gathering whispers from the palace corridors and reporting back with coded messages hidden in the very fluff they managed. Now, you're picturing feathers as weapons, right? Well, you're on the right track. There's a quirky historical tidbit here. Some eunuchs were rumoured to disguise tiny knives inside their fluffy duties, wielding almost invisible weapons that could incapacitate a rival before a pillow fight, or worse. While some sources laugh off these claims as palace gossip, others hint at real incidents where feathers masked hidden blades, sending chills through the imperial staff. You now realise the fluffer's role was never purely comforted, was a frontline position in a never-ending game of palace intrigue, where loyalties shifted, like the tides, and soft pillows could smother, literally or figuratively, growing threats. But here's the kicker. Eunuchs' status as trusted fluffer, servants also sparked unease. While they were supposed to be loyal due to their unique predicament, some emperors still feared their influence and descent. There are whispered tales of emperors blinding their eunuchs as punishmenta, horrifying practice, reflecting the brutal paradox of trust and mistrust spinning through these silk halls. For a lighter note, did you know some eunuchs apparently earned nicknames based on their fluffing styles? There's mention of one called Feather Whisperer, famed for turning the hardest pillows soft enough for the emperor's royal nap. It's almost like a medieval spa treatment with deadly stakes. Still, historians debate whether eunuchs' political roles were overstated by later chroniclers, or if their influence was genuinely game-changing. Were these eunuchs mere background fluffers, or the real power behind the throne's pillows? The answer remains feathered in mystery. You step back and realise the peculiar blend of vulnerability and power. Eunuchs embodied silent guardians, shaping the emperor's rest, the politics of sleep, and the empire's fate. You lean in closer now, because here's where the softness of feathers meets the sharp edge of danger. Poison. In the Byzantine Empire, poison was the unseen enemy, lurking in every corner, every cup of wine, and yes, every pillow. Imagine that the very things meant to cradle an emperor's head could be turned into silent assassins. Pillow fluffing wasn't just about comfort or secret codes. It was a deadly security protocol. You can almost smell the mixture of lavender and beeswax. The palace attendants used to keep the pillows fresh, but mixed into that scent was an undercurrent of suspicion. Historical sources tell us that poisoners frequently targeted the pillow, slipping deadly needles or powdered toxins between the down feathers, hoping the ruler would die in his sleep or suffer a slow, untraceable demise. The thought alone makes you want to reach over and pat the pillow, just to be sure it's safe. Historians still argue whether pillow poisoning was as widespread as the chroniclers suggest, or if it was more a symbol of the era's paranoia. Regardless, it was enough for emperors to maintain a cadre of trusted fluffer attendants whose job included testing pillows for these hidden traps. They'd comb through the fluff meticulously, sometimes using bells or threads to detect foreign objects or needles lodged in the down. It was a high-stakes game of find the needle in the haystack. Only in this case, the hay was soft and feather-filled. Commanders of the imperial bedchamber required not just fluffing skills, but a sharp eye that could save a life. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. One fluffer supposedly carried a tiny trained ferret, which helped sniff out poison or concealed objects within the pillows. While this sounds like something out of a medieval spy movie, fragments of palace records suggest animals were sometimes employed in secret security tasks. Imagine a furry little bodyguard crawling over pillows while you fluff away. But poison wasn't the only danger lurking in the softness. Sometimes assassins embroidered fine needles with poison directly into silk covers, which would prick the emperor's skin if he shifted wrong. The fluffer's role was to feel for these concealed dangers during the nighttime pillow fluff rituals. You start to see why trust was paramount. This constant threat of poison quietly reshaped royal customs. Emperors often slept with their pillows, resting on stands of sacred relics or beneath protective amulets, blending spiritual protection with physical safety. The pillow was almost a battlefield between comfort, superstition, and mortal peril. Surprisingly, political paranoia sometimes eclipsed actual threats. Some emperors ordered pillow inspections so rigorously that fluffer mistakes, like a slightly misaligned cushion, could be interpreted as signs of conspiracy. It's a reminder that in such an intense environment, symbols and suspicions were nearly indistinguishable. The notion of the pillow as a tool for assassination is a clear example of how soft power had a very literal physical edge in Byzantium. You can't help but shudder, thinking that the pillows cradling one of history's most powerful rulers might have contained a deadly sting. Historians still debate how much of this poison paranoia was politically motivated fear and how much was grounded in real palace incidents. Either way, pillow fluffers weren't just making beds, they were guarding the line between life and death. You think the fluffer's job couldn't get any more intense? Hold on, because here comes the solemn oath, sacred pledge, binding these attendants to a life of secrecy and unwavering loyalty. You might expect pillow fluffers to be just nervous servants, quietly tending to goose feathers, but in reality they swore a formal vow as serious as any knight's oath of fealty. No fluffing on the side, no whispered gossip, no accidental slips. Just you, your pillow, and your silence. The fluffer's oath, recorded in fragments by Byzantine chroniclers, demanded absolute secrecy about all matters witnessed in the imperial chambers. These attendants often overheard sensitive state conversations, knew about secret alliances, plotting nobles, and even imperial romances. One wrong word, and the consequences could be catastrophic, often punishment by blinding, exile, or even worse. This officially sanctioned silence wasn't just about keeping court secrecy, it was about survival. Remember, the emperor's enemies were everywhere, and even a misplaced feather could trigger suspicion of treachery. For the fluffer, loyalty wasn't just a virtue, it was the difference between life and a gruesome end. Amazingly, this oath also included a rather odd clause requiring fluffers to maintain perfect fluffiness at all times. It sounds like a whimsical add-on, but in reality, this was a metaphor for unwavering diligence and attention to detail. Imagine swearing an oath to never let a pillow droop again talk about commitment. Historians debate whether this oath had any legal standing or was more of a tradition reinforced by palace etiquette. Some suggest it was part of a wider oath among palace servants designed to create a secret community bound by trust and shared peril. Others argue it was a theatrical gesture helping to instill discipline and control over a volatile court population. Here's a quirky tidbit you might enjoy. Some fluffers reportedly kept tiny leather-bound fluff books, handwritten guides that included secret codes, pillow arrangements, and instructions on the correct fluffing pressure. These books, passed down discreetly, might have acted as training manuals, as well as loyalty contracts a blend of craft and conspiracy. The oath wasn't only about silence, it also forbade the fluffer from personal ambition. No courtly games, no seeking favour from other courtiers, just the pillow mission. However, you can imagine that being so close to imperial power occasionally tempted some fluffers to manoeuvre subtly behind the scenes. This paradox vow of loyalty, combined with intimate knowledge, makes the fluffer's role intriguingly ambiguous. Some might have been genuinely devoted to the emperor's well-being. Others could have exploited the trust for political gain, quietly fluffing chaos into the empire itself. But no matter their motives, breaking the oath was a terrifying prospect. Blinding was a common punishment for palace betrayal, a grim act meant to deprive offenders of sight and power. There are even rare rumours of fluffers punished by being stuffed into their own pillows, a chilling but unverified anecdote, highlighting the brutal stakes inside these silk-lined walls. Byzantine politics were a constant dance of trust and suspicion, and the fluffer's oath symbolised this precarious balance. You begin to understand that beyond softness and comfort lay a hardened bedrock of loyalty enforced through ritual and fear. The blend of sacred promise, covert power, and feathered finesse gave the pillow fluffer a place in history that still sparks debate. Was the oath a noble tradition, a tool of control, or a survival mechanism in one of history's most treacherous courts? Scholars continue to pass the fragmentary records with no definitive answer. You reach out, adjusting an invisible pillow of your own, and wonder, what would it be like to live a life where fluffing wasn't just a chore, but a sacred and dangerous duty sworn under oath? You think pillows belonged only inside the palace, fluffing dreams under imperial heads. Think again. In Byzantine diplomacy, pillows carried messages that spoke louder than any official envoy's words. Imagine you're a foreign ambassador arriving at Constantinople, Hank the Viking or Louis the Frank, and your first impression depends not on the emperor's smile, but on the fluffiness of his pillows. Yes, you heard that right. Pillow diplomacy was a thing, and respecting the fluff was respecting the empire itself. Ambassadors were not just entertained with sumptuous banquets and grand audiences, but shown into rooms where pillow fluffing was a carefully staged spectacle. The softness, the arrangement, even the scent of the pillows were scrutinized as diplomatic signals. A lavishly fluffed pillow indicated the emperor's goodwill and openness. A stiff, barely fluffed pillow might signal suspicion or displeasure. Your host's cushions measured your welcome. You might chuckle at the notion of pillows as diplomatic envoys, but such symbolism was incredibly powerful in Byzantium's court culture. These were people who specialized in ceremonial language, often relying on gestures, gifts, and silent signals more than blunt words to negotiate alliances or intimidate rivals. The pillow, bulky and soft, was actually a canvas for imperial messaging, as subtle as a locked door or a side glance in today's politics. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some arriving ambassadors brought their own special pillows as gifts to the emperor, stuffed with rare spices or exotic feathers from distant Landstow curry favour. These diplomatic pillows were often adorned with elaborate embroidery, designed to impress visually and scent-wise, essentially a puffed-up power move without saying a word. Historians still argue whether pillow diplomacy was formalised with codified meanings or if it was a more spontaneous, unscripted art. Did the emperor's chamberlain provide manuals to emissaries explaining the fluff etiquette, or was it a game learned through experience and gossip? The records are frustratingly vague, but the general consensus is that pillows were part of a broader system of imperial symbolism that required finesse to interpret. On top of all this, pillow diplomacy could serve as a test of an envoy's cultural savvy. When a foreigner misinterpreted the fluffed or unfluffed cushion, it could be seen as a grave faux pas, deriding Byzantine authority and risking diplomatic offence. No pressure for your luggage, ambassador. But pillow diplomacy wasn't always about gifting softness. Sometimes it was a warning. Ambassadors were subtly reminded that the emperor's comfortant by proxy, his power was not to be trifled with. A less than perfectly fluffed pillow could communicate displeasure without the need for harsh words, a velvet glove hiding iron authority. This ritual extended beyond the palace walls. Local governors and ministries sometimes mimicked the emperor's pillow customs to showcase their allegiance to Constantinople. Fluffing was a way to say, "I understand the throne's language. I'm loyal in heart and comfort." It's a curious idea, but remember, in a world where written communication could be intercepted and words twisted, non-verbal cues like pillow fluffing provided a secure channel for delicate political expression. You might wonder how many alliances started or fell apart over a misfluffed cushion, or how often ambassadors secretly envied the fluffers for their inside knowledge of court secrets. Pillow diplomacy wasn't just a quaint custom. It was a form of power projection, where the softest messages were the deadliest. The next time you fluff your own pillow, think, could that tiny gesture echo an empire's message of peace, war, or conspiracy? In Byzantium, it just might have. You might think the pillow fluffer's world was a man's realm. But step careful, because here enters Theodora, the empress who started her life not on a throne but on a stage, and who turned pillow fluffing into a potent weapon of influence. Theodora's story is the quintessential Cinderella tale with a Byzantine twist. From an actress, a profession often scorned for scandalous reasons, to the empire's most powerful woman, she understood exactly how even the softest cushions could cushion power literally and figuratively. Picture Theodora in the purple chamber, subtly directing her trusted eunuch fluffers to arrange pillows just so, sending invisible signals to the emperor and the court. Unlike other imperial figures, who treated such routines as mere comfort, Theodora weaponized pillow talk, using fluffing positions to signal alliances, detect threats, or subtly control the flow of information. She knew the power of touching the emperor's rest area, because controlling sleep meant influencing dreams, moods, and decisions. Historians still argue whether Theodora's command over pillow fluffers was a deliberate political strategy or a fortunate accident stemming from her closeness to the emperor. But it's undeniable that she elevated the ritual from domestic service to a form of palace politics zone embroidered with nuance and subtlety. If you think that's just dry power play, here's a quirky detail. Theodora supposedly once orchestrated a pillow arrangement that conveyed a secret warning about a proposed coup during a luxurious imperial feast. The emperor noticed the unusual fluff pattern known that signalled alarm, allowing him to quietly detain conspirators before chaos broke out. A fluffy rebellion? Maybe. This episode perfectly illustrates how pillow fluffers under Theodora's watch became more than mere servants. They were active participants in palace intrigue, operating under the keen eyes of an empress who understood that soft power often hits hardest where you least expect. And, yes, Theodora's secret also covers some fun gospel gent, has it? She insisted on having her own secret pillow fluffer independent from the palace eunuchs. So rumours say she could whisper sweet nothings or sharp commands through the fluff without anyone else overhearing. That's like having a royal Snapchat, but with feathers. Of course, scholars debate how much of these tales are fact versus later embellished legend, as Theodora's reign remains one of Byzantium's most romanticised stories. Did she really master the fluffy arts to that degree, or was it just a court joke that turned into myth? That's up for grabs. But it's worth noting that under Theodora's influence, pillow fluffing and, by extension, court etiquette became more performative, a refined art where power and comfort intertwined. Controls over who fluffed what and when became routines wrapped in political meaning. So, now you're seeing the pillow, not just as a sleep aid, but as a political tool carefully wielded by an empress who knew how to play the long game with long feathers. Theodora's rise from backstage to the throne room's most intimate moments makes you reconsider how much power could perch on a handful of down. Between you and me, it's no wonder historians often call her the ultimate feather queen of Byzantium's tangled web of politics and fluff. She certainly changed how a pillow could rule an empire. As the year cycles towards spring, Constantinople's rhythms change, along with the scent of blooming jasmine drifting through the palace corridors. Within the ornate basilicas, shadowy liturgical ceremonies unfold, and by some curious twist of tradition, pillow fluffing becomes a sacral ritual as sacred as the incense rising before the altar. Yes, you heard right. Fluffing pillows during Easter Mass was more than housekeeping it, was a holy act woven into the Byzantine spiritual tapestry. You imagine the emperor seated solemnly, robed in gold and purple, cushions arranged carefully to elevate not just his body, but his place in the divine hierarchy. Each pillow had a role, some supporting his back, others cushioning his feet, all adjusted with reverent precision to reflect the sanctity of the occasion. The fluffers moved silently, their hands parting the feathers, not just to comfort, but to symbolize renewal, resurrection, and divine favor pillows, as metaphors for spiritual softness embracing the might of the Christ. Historians still argue whether these fluffing rituals originated purely in religious ceremonies, or whether they were more about reinforcing imperial authority by blending church and state symbolism through pillows. Perhaps it was both. After all, Byzantium loved a good mix of theology and politics alike, throwing a secret feathered party where everyone's invited except the unfluffed. An amusing fringe tidbit: some fluffers allegedly wore special gloves during these rituals, embroidered with crosses, claiming touching sacred pillows with bare hands might disturb holy spirits or worse, invite infant demon curses. It sounds like a medieval version of worrying about static electricity messing with your phone, but in the Byzantine palace an unclean touch was serious business. These fluffing ceremonies often coincided with moments of intense political theatre. For example, adjusting certain pillows in front of the clergy was seen as reenacting Christ's rebirth, and subtly underscoring the emperor's divine right. The church approved this fluff symbolism, as long as it didn't eclipse their own spiritual power, but you can imagine the delicate negotiations behind the scenes. Beyond the palace, this soft ritual filtered through religious traditions across Byzantium's vast territories. Provincial bishops and nobles adopted their own versions of liturgical fluffing, blending local folklore with imperial symbolism, reminder that even something as simple as fluffing could serve to connect distant provinces to the throne spiritually and politically. But the ritual wasn't always peaceful. Some texts hint at fluffing disputes among clergy and palace official sheeted debates on how many pillows were appropriate, or where to place them during the most solemn moments. That's a fluffy theological showdown for you. You might say it was the medieval equivalent of arguing over the right playlist at church. Did you ever imagine fluffing had such a spiritual dimension? Byzantium proves that no act was too soft or too mundane to be infused with sacred meaning. The fluffers, in this light, were not mere servants, but ritual artists, shaping the intersection of divine grace and earthly power stitch by feathered stitch. This religion meets feather phenomenon is exactly why scholars sometimes debate whether pillow fluffing was a courtly chore or a liturgical calling. Either way, you have to agree it's a spectacularly soft way to touch eternity. You might think feathers were just feathers, but in Byzantium they were as valuable as gold, sometimes even more so. The state treasury kept a close eye on every goose feather that padded an emperor's pillow, recognizing that the softness of a ruler's rest reflected the empire's wealth and stability. Imagine auditors tabulating down by down, feather by feather, as meticulously as if they were counting coins in the imperial treasury. The supply chain for pillow stuffing was a vital economic lifeline. Goose farms near the Bosphorus ringed the empire's capital like feather factories, with annual harvests timed to meet the demands of the palace's perpetual fluffing ritual. The best feather, soft, light, and resilient, were saved for imperial use, while lesser quality down-padded the cushions of courtiers and officials. Historians still argue about how imperial provisioning for feathers was organised. Was it centralised under a tight bureaucratic system, or did palace servants rely on informal networks and gifts from local producers? Some pieced together accounts hint at intricate feather taxation systems imposed on provincial landowners, ensuring high-quality stuffing reached the throne's chambers regularly. Here's a weird but fun detail. The Byzantine treasury sometimes valued feathers not only for their fluffiness, but for supposed magical properties. Certain feather types were thought to bring good fortune, ward off illness, or even influence dreams positively. The treasury guarded these enchanted feathers jealously, assigning them special storage. This feather obsession also explains why the emperor's pillow could signify status as much as coins in the treasury. An emperor's pillow overflowing with rare, white down the finest grade, was a wink to domestic and foreign visitors alike that the empire was strong, luxurious, and well run. On the flip side, a slovenly pillow with shabby stuffing hinted at decay or ill health in the regime. There were also surprisingly strict rules on feather quality. Courtiers attempting to mimic imperial luxury by hoarding precious down risked harsh punishment, sometimes ordered to return seized feathers or face fines. The feather market was a surprisingly regulated part of the bureaucratic machine, tied into wider trade networks stretching along the Silk Road and across the Mediterranean. Reading between the lines, you see feathers represented more than just comfort. They were a symbol of wealth, order, and control in the empire. The fluff count was practically a barometer of political health. You might smile, imagining treasury clerks balancing their feather ledgers next to gold coins, noting the preciseness expected from fluffy accounting and wondering if there was a fluff accountant job title. Could that have been the most delicate job in all Byzantium? Scholarly debate persists over how much of this feather regulation was practical versus performative ear, carefully staged, attention to detail, signalling Byzantine obsession with order and symbolism. But one thing remains clear: goose feathers weren't just filling pillows, they were filling the empire's image. Next time you toss a pillow, think about the hidden economy of feathers beneath your head. A luxurious web spanning far beyond the bedroom, entangling farms, tax officials, and emperors alike. You wouldn't expect Viking warriors the fierce Varangians standing guard over a Byzantine emperor's pillow, but that's precisely what happened in the capital's most guarded chambers. These northern bodyguards, recruited from the icy reaches of Scandinavia, weren't just muscle for hire. They had a unique role in the fluffy world of imperial security, using pillows in a rather unusual test for loyalty and threat detection. Imagine towering Norsemen, adorned in chainmail and holding axes, stationed silently around the imperial bed as a fluffer arranges the emperor's couch. Their presence was intimidating, but their responsibilities extended beyond sword-wielding. According to some accounts, Varangian guards were tasked with monitoring the emperor's sweat during the night, sweat be checking pillows for any unusual moisture, or scent signalling poison, illness, or signs of stress that might indicate a coup. You've heard that kings sleep lightly, but these guys took it to a new level. Sweat-stained pillows could mean fear, impending danger, or worse, betrayal by those closest to the throne. This practice may sound a bit bizarre now, but it was part of a layered system of palace safety, an early version of biometric surveillance, just with feathers and sniff tests. Historians still debate the exact nature and seriousness of this Varangian test. Was it a formalized ritual, or just a folkloric exaggeration? Some argue it was a syndrome of palace paranoia taken to extremes, while others point out the practical use of such monitoring in an era when poison was a constant threat. You probably didn't know that Vikings, far from their plundering stereotype, also served as sophisticated protectors, blending brute strength with subtle vigilance. Their reputation for loyalty to Byzantine emperors was legendary, partly because their roles extended into these unusual duties of fluffy forensic surveillance. On a quirkier note, some Byzantine sources jokingly referred to the Varangians as pillow sniffers, or feather sleuths, teasing their strange blend of brutish demeanour and delicate inspection tasks. You can almost hear one gruff guard mumbling about the emperor's pillow smells in the dead of night. This curious synergy of fear and comfort encapsulates the Byzantine court's dual nature. Elegance shadowed by constant threat. The Varangian guards were the fluffy bed's icy boundary, brute sentinels guarding against softness turned lethal. Of course, slaves or eunuchs weren't trusted to perform this sweat inspection role, which speaks volumes about the special status and trust afforded to these foreign guardians. The Varangians formed a peculiar bridge between the empire's inner circle and the wild northlands, serving as both shields and censors. Although historians continue to toss around questions about how much the Varangians truly contributed beyond muscle, their unique involvement with pillows underscores the Byzantines' obsession with layered security. The emperor's rest was not just a luxury, it was a surveillance zone, guarded by fierce protectors, blending fluff with force. So next time you think about Vikings, remember they might just have been the medieval world's original fuzzy security officers, sniffing out trouble beneath the down. You might think contraband smuggling and pillow fluffing don't mix, but in the Byzantine Empire's bustling capital of Constantinople, the feather-stuffed pillows became unwilling accomplices in the illicit Silk Road between East and West. Imagine undercover traders and palace servants slipping exotic spices, forbidden texts, and precious gems concealed within pillows meant for the emperor's exclusive use. This wasn't just smuggling, it was a high-stakes game of espionage and luxury trade hidden in plain sight. You shuffle through the crowded markets, where velvet-covered pillows, line vendor stalls, each feather-stuffed cushion, a canvas for secret commerce. The Silk Road's treasures find silks from China, precious lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and fragrant frankincense from Arabia sometimes found their way into the fillings or intricate pillow covers, smuggled past imperial customs under the noses of ravenous tax collectors. Historians still argue how widespread such smuggling was, and whether it was tacitly tolerated or ruthlessly persecuted. Some sources suggest that court officials occasionally turned a blind eye as long as the contraband reinforced the empire's luxurious image, while others imply strict crackdowns with severe penalties for caught smugglers. The pillow trade was a shadow economy, as featherlight as its stuffing. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some smugglers reportedly specialised in feather hides, ideal for secret courier networks, stuffing messages, or microfilms. Well, scrolls, disguised as tiny scrolls, deep inside down pillows. Imagine a pillow arriving at court not just smelling of lavender, but whispering secrets in its fluff. This double life of pillows, as both comfort objects and secret smuggling devices, reflects the paradox of Byzantine society and empire at the crossroads of trade and intrigue, hospitality and suspicion. The pillows were both a symbol of opulence and a vessel for shadowy dealings. Moreover, some court eunuchs and fluffers might have been involved in intelligence gathering through these smuggling networks, acting as couriers or informants, passing information sewn tightly into the pillow seams. The feather-stuffed pillows became a literal medium for clandestine communication. The role of Silk Road smuggling also underscores the complexities of the empire's economy. Luxury goods made the emperor's court famous, but their illicit circulation added layers to the empire's shadow diplomacy. Silk and feathers combined to cloak secrets and power plays, You might laugh imagining customs officials poking suspicious pillows with swords, only to find a hidden treasure trove of spices or secret scrolls instead of simple feathers. The confusion must have been epic. Scholars debate to this day whether pillow smuggling incidents helped fuel larger political scandals or trade embargo negotiations. What we do know is that in Byzantium, even the softest cushion could hide the hardest truth. So, next time you fluff your pillow, remember, in medieval Constantinople, it might have been more than just feathers you were supporting it, might have carried the secrets of empires. You're probably not expecting to find astrologers in the fluffiest corners of Byzantium's imperial bedchamber, but in the mystic, swirling courts of Constantinople, pillow astrology was a thing. Yes, this wasn't about reading stars, but interpreting the scattered feathers beneath the emperor's head, for omens of fortune or doom, a bizarre blend of divination and fluff management that might make you snicker in disbelief. Picture a solemn court astrologer kneeling beside the emperor's pillow at dawn, sifting gently through displaced feathers left by the night's sleep. According to some Byzantine beliefs, the patterned feathers formed as they shifted overnight was a cosmic message. A feather here could mean victory. A missing down there might hint at betrayal. This kind of feather reading was one of the ways the court tried to grasp the opaque threads of fate woven around the empire. Historians still argue how formalised this practice was. Was pillow astrology a regular official duty performed by imperial mystics, or more a fringe pastime indulged in secret by hopeful rulers? Either way, the symbolic weight of feathers as cosmic signs was part of the empire's intense spiritual worldview, where every object seemed invested with divine meaning. A quirky tale involved an emperor who reportedly changed a major policy decision based on the way his pillow feathers lay one morning. He believed it was a sign from the heavens urging mercy over war. That's some serious fluff power influencing politics. Beyond prophecy, pillow astrology also intersected with dream interpretation. The emperor's dreams were carefully scrutinized by monks and court diviners, and the pillow's fluffy condition was part of the equation. A well-fluffed pillow promised restful visions, while a messy one foretold turmoil. Feathers and dreams danced together in an imperial ritual of fate guessing. On a lighter note, some court jesters mocked pillow astrology, calling it the emperor's feather guessing game, and joked that it was about as reliable as catching a feather in a breeze. But in a world where prediction was prized and fate feared, such rituals remained entrenched. These mystical interpretations influenced imperial psychology and governance. The belief that fate whispered through down feathers added to the emperor's aura as divinely guided, a ruler not only of lands but of cosmic order. Of course, scholars continue to discuss whether pillow astrology was truly influential or more of a performative tradition to bolster the emperor's legitimacy. Fluff or faith? The lines blurred. So, next time you toss your pillow before bedtime, pause and imagine if those displaced feathers could foretell your dreamser the fate of empires. In Byzantium, even sleep was written in the stars. And feathers. Things take a darker turn as the story brings you to one of the most dramatic moments in pillow fluffing lore, the fluffer's revenge. Imagine a palace servant, so disgruntled, so perilously close to the emperor, that his fluffy duty becomes a deadly plot. The tale whispers of an attendant who nearly smothered a tyrant under his own down, turning the beloved softness into a weapon of rebellion. You crouch behind the canopy bed, sensing the tension as the fluffer trusted. Even cherished plots to seal the emperor's fate beneath layers of suffocating feathers. Such an assassination attempt wasn't just fantasy. In the Byzantine court, the line between servant and conspirator was thin, and power games sometimes played out in the softest places. Historians still debate the authenticity of these accounts. Was the attempted smothering a real event recorded in secret annals, or a later embellishment illustrating the dangers of intimate access? Some sources treat it as cautionary folklore warning officials about the risks of placing too much trust in those closest to the ruler. Here's the quirky side. Some tales say the fluffer resigned his fate, turning his pillow skills into a last act of defiance before being caught. Others suggest secret alliances between fluffers and rival factions, where a softer hand could spell doom for an emperor. You start to picture fluffy nightmares with entirely new meanings. This story highlights the paradox of the fluffer's position close enough to cradle the emperor's head, but also to crush it. It's a reminder that in Byzantium, power was a feather-light touch away from peril, and comfort could mask betrayal. More broadly, the fluffer's revenge reflects wider tensions within the court, where trust was scarce and treachery constant. Palace insiders often walked a razor's edge, juggling loyalty and ambition in a realm where a poorly fluffed pillow could signal death. The incident also speaks to why the oath of secrecy and unwavering loyalty was enforced so harshly for fluffers. Breaking that trust wasn't just professional misconduct, it was potentially life-ending treason. You might find it haunting to realise that one of the softest roles in the empire harboured such deadly risks. It turns a simple act of fluffing into a stage for high-stakes political drama. Scholars continue to probe archives and manuscripts, trying to separate fact from legend in this tragic episode. Whether true or apocryphal, the story remains a gripping testament to the deadly politics wrapped in Byzantium's feathered cocoon. So, when you next fluff your pillow before sleep, remember it once held secrets that could topple emperors or ignite court conspiracies. It's easy to imagine Western crusaders rolling their eyes at such elaborate pillow fluffing, ritual-stiff knights in chainmail, shrugging off what they saw as Byzantine frivolity. But here's the twist. Once they conquered Constantinople, those same crusaders couldn't resist adopting the role of official pillow fluffers themselves. Talk about learning the fluff. You picture a group of grumbling, battle-worn Frankish knights trying to navigate the delicate art of pillow fluffing in the imperial palace. Swords still hanging from their belts, but hands awkwardly patting down goose feathers. The ritual that they once mocked as a feat suddenly became essential to occupying power proving. That even the toughest warriors couldn't ignore the power encapsulated in a perfectly fluffed pillow. Historians still debate how genuine crusader adoption of pillow fluffing was. Did they really come to respect these rituals? Or was it a begrudging performance to win over Byzantine subjects and maintain control over the city? Some chroniclers claim certain Norman and French nobles eagerly fashioned themselves as masters of fluff, while others insist it was nothing more than an awkward imitation. One fun nugget. Some crusaders reportedly tried to improve the fluffing process by adding Western-style goose down mixtures, or even importing feathers from as far away as Iceland, blending northern fluff with Byzantine sophistication talk about cultural fusion. Although their methods often clashed with established fluffing traditions, the hybrids they created still managed to uphold the ritual's symbolic weight. Yet, the ebb and flow of cultural exchange underscored a shrewd realization. Pillow fluffing wasn't mere comfort, but a political act that cemented legitimacy and control. The Crusaders learned that mastering the pillow arts was part of a broader strategy to assert authority in unfamiliar territory. Fluffing the emperor's rest became a surprisingly potent sign of power transfer or consolidation. It symbolized taking over not just the throne, but the intimate rhythms of imperial life, the whispers, dreams, and secret vulnerabilities once guarded by loyal Byzantine fluffers. Of course, not all Crusader fluffers were equal or successful. Some bungled the ritual, causing awkward diplomatic incidents or spurring laughter among Byzantine exiles. But the fact that they even tried tells you how seriously a fluffing crisis could undermine authority. Historians still puzzle over what motivated this cross-cultural fluffing adoption. Was it respect? Political savvy? A desire to impress? Maybe a bit of each. You're left chuckling at the strange image of battle-hardened knights bowing over pillows, a sharp contrast to their usual swordplay, realizing that in Byzantium and, apparently beyond, the soft arts could be as crucial as the hard ones. Fluff, then, was not just a cultural curiosity, but a language of conquest and governance written in goose down. You might think the story of Byzantine pillow fluffers drifts off with the empire's fall, but you'd be wrong. The final chapter is as dramatic as the empire itself. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 didn't just mark the end of an empire. It began with a deflated pillow. Not literally, of course, but symbolically, the collapse of the empire mirrored the final soft gasp of imperial comfort unravelling. Imagine the once opulent imperial bedchamber filled with tattered pillows, feathers spilling onto cold marble floors from cushions neglected amidst siege and panic. The familiar ritual of pillow fluffing faded as the city walls crumbled and chaos overwhelmed the Palacia, last quiet rebellion of softness against hard, relentless conquest. The final emperor, Constantine XI, famed for his stoic bravery, is said to have spent his last hours among pillows, fluffed, not for comfort, but for defiance. A tender, yet futile gesture in the face of the Ottoman army's advance. Historians still debate the role imperial rituals played in those final days, whether such acts signified hope, despair, or stubborn, clinging to tradition. There's a poignant fringe story that a loyal pillow fluffer remained by Constantine's side, fluffing pillows even as the walls were protest a testament to loyalty in the empire's darkest hour. The image is haunting. Feathers flying like fallen hopes, a soft fight against a brutal end. This decline of fluff symbolized a broader unravelling, the loss of control, order, and sacred pomp all tied up in the softness of pillows, those everyday objects turned instruments of imperial power and survival. The fall was not just a military defeat, but a cultural and ritualistic collapse. One lesson lingers. The Byzantine pillow fluffer's role was always more than a menial task. It was a metaphor for the fragile balances holding empire and power together. Once those cushions deflated, so too did the imperial facade. As feathers scattered into the streets of Constantinople, the empire's legacy fluttered into history, soft but undeniably resilient in memory. And while the Ottoman Empire rose, the delicate art of pillow fluffing slipped quietly into the past, a lost ritual echoing the empire's grandeur and fragility. So, as you settle tonight, think of the pillow, the silent witness to history's softest secrets and the emperor's last dreams. In every feather, a whisper of power, loyalty, and the bittersweet fall of an empire. Now, as you let your eyelids grow heavy and the world softens around you, imagine those ancient chambers one last time, the silken pillows, the flickering shadows, the whispered secrets caught in down and thread. The stories of power and peril tuck in beside you, a comforting murmur in the quiet night. Remember that even the loftiest empires relied on the smallest acts, that the empress's whisper, the eunuch's steady hand, the fluffer's silent oat hall weave together in history's rich fabric. The folds and fluffs of those pillows held not just sleep, but the hopes, fears, and fragile human moments behind the great halls. So rest now, knowing you've brushed feathers with history, and that tomorrow the story continues quietly, just like a pillow fluffed for the first time at dawn. Sleep well, and sweet dreams.